had given everything to that company. 5 years of late nights that stretched past midnight. Weekends sacrificed while my friends enjoyed their lives. Projects that made other employees run in the opposite direction landed on my desk, and I delivered them perfectly every single time. I watched our revenue numbers climb month after month, knowing my work was the engine driving those results. The promotion to senior account director was mine. Not hoped for, not promised. It was signed, sealed, and approved. The paperwork sat in HR waiting for the announcement. My manager, Trevor Walsh, had congratulated me privately 2 weeks earlier. "You've earned this, Rachel," he'd said with what seemed like genuine pride. The board unanimously approved it. I had already started planning how I'd restructure my team, which new clients I'd pursue, how I'd mentor the junior staff. The announcement was scheduled for Monday morning's all-hands meeting. I could practically taste the validation after years of proving myself in a company that seemed to promote everyone except me. But Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. "Need to see you in my office, now." The walk down that hallway felt different. Something was wrong. Trevor's office felt smaller than usual as I sat across from his mahogany desk. He wasn't making eye contact, shuffling papers that clearly weren't important. The silence stretched until I couldn't stand it anymore. "You wanted to see me?" I prompted. He finally looked up and I saw something I'd never seen before. Guilt mixed with defiance. "Rachel, we need to discuss your promotion." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "What about it?" "We've decided to postpone it." He leaned back in his leather chair, trying to project authority. "Indefinitely." "Postpone?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Trevor, the paperwork is already filed. The board approved it unanimously." He waved his hand dismissively. "Things change. We need to keep the peace around here." Keep the peace. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Around the office, I was known as the peacekeeper. I mediated conflicts, smoothed over client disputes, and helped struggling colleagues without being asked. If anyone kept the peace, it was me. "What peace are you talking about?" I asked carefully. His smirk told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. "Look, Rachel," Trevor said, settling deeper into his chair with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. "Some people might get jealous if you get rewarded. We can't have that kind of tension in the workplace." I stared at him, processing his words. "Which people specifically?" "You know how it is. Office dynamics, politics." He shrugged like we were discussing the weather instead of my career. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. This wasn't about office politics or keeping peace. This was personal. "Trevor, I need you to be completely honest with me. Why is my promotion really being canceled?" He leaned forward, and for the first time in 5 years of working together, I saw who he really was. The mask slipped completely. "You want honesty?" His voice carried a cruel edge I'd never heard before. "You don't fit the type of woman I promote around here." My hand instinctively moved to my phone in my blazer pocket. I'd been recording important meetings lately after a colleague warned me about Trevor's reputation. My finger found the record button and pressed it. "What type is that?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Trevor's next words would haunt him forever, though he had no idea yet. "The type that's, attractive enough. Sexy enough." He gestured vaguely at me like I was a disappointing product. "I promote girls I wouldn't mind spending time with after hours, if you know what I mean. Women who understand how things work around here." The room felt like it was spinning, but I forced myself to stay calm. My phone was capturing every syllable of this career-ending confession. "So my promotion is being canceled because I'm not attractive enough for you?" I needed him to say it clearly, completely. "Look, it's not personal," he said, as if that made it better. "It's just business. The women who succeed here know how to play the game. They understand what it takes to get ahead." I thought about Jessica, who'd been promoted to marketing director last year, despite having half my experience. About Amanda, who'd somehow landed the regional manager position after just 18 months with the company. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My hands weren't shaking yet, but they would be soon. I needed to get out of this office before I said something that would ruin everything. "I see," I managed. "Thank you for your honesty." I walked out of Trevor's office with my head high and my phone burning a hole in my pocket. The recording was still running. Every step back to my desk felt surreal, like I was walking through water. My colleagues looked up and smiled, completely unaware that their boss had just destroyed any illusion of fairness in our workplace. Back at my desk, I stopped the recording and immediately saved it to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I sat there, staring at my computer screen, letting Trevor's words replay in my mind. Girls I wouldn't mind spending time with after hours. Women who understand how to play the game. My anger was building, but underneath it was something more powerful. Determination. I'd been raised by a mother who taught me never to let anyone diminish my worth. I'd worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let some small-minded man with an inflated ego destroy my career. I opened a new folder on my computer and titled it Evidence. Then I started gathering everything I'd need to bury Trevor Walsh professionally and legally. Performance reviews, client testimonials, revenue reports, project completion records, every piece of documentation that proved my value to the company went into that folder. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That weekend, I worked with the focused intensity of someone whose entire future depended on getting every detail right. Spreadsheets filled with my quarterly numbers showed I generated over $2 million in new business this year alone. Client emails praising my work painted a picture of someone who was not just competent, but exceptional. I found the congratulatory email from Trevor 2 weeks earlier. Rachel, the board was impressed by your presentation and unanimously approved your promotion. You've more than earned this opportunity. The timestamp and his digital signature would be crucial evidence. But the most damning evidence was buried in my email archives. Months of subtle undermining, biased performance feedback, and attempts to exclude me from high-profile projects. I'd saved everything, not out of paranoia, but out of a lifetime habit of thorough documentation. One email stood out from 3 months ago. Trevor had written to the entire leadership team about a major client presentation, conveniently forgetting to include me, despite it being my account. When I'd politely reminded him, his response was telling, "Let's have Amanda take the lead on this one. She has the right presence for this client. The right presence." Now I understood what he'd meant. I compiled everything into a comprehensive file, organized chronologically with clear headers and executive summaries. If I was going to war, I'd be armed with facts. Monday morning arrived, and I walked into the office knowing everything had changed, truthful indeed, even though Trevor didn't realize it yet. He strutted around the office with his usual arrogance, joking with the male managers about their weekend golf games and complimenting the younger female employees on their outfits. During the all-hands meeting, where my promotion should have been announced, Trevor instead introduced a new initiative for team cohesion. I sat in the back, watching him perform for an audience that had no idea what kind of man they were applauding. "We want to make sure everyone feels valued and included," he said, looking directly at me with a smug smile. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions to maintain workplace harmony. Several colleagues glanced at me sympathetically, probably wondering why I looked so calm. They expected disappointment, maybe anger. Instead, I was calculating. Every word Trevor spoke was digging his grave deeper. After the meeting, Jessica approached me. "I heard about your promotion. That's so unfair, Rachel. Everyone knows you deserved it." "These things happen," I replied carefully, "but I'm working on making sure fairness wins in the end." She looked confused, but I couldn't explain. Not yet. That afternoon, I got an unexpected ally. A folded piece of paper appeared under my office door while I was in a client meeting. When I returned and opened it, my heart started racing. He did the same thing to me 2 years ago. "I have emails. Call me." It was signed with just a phone number, but I recognized the handwriting. Claire from accounting, who'd left the company suddenly last year. I called her during lunch break, stepping outside to ensure privacy. "Rachel, I've been waiting for someone to finally challenge him." Claire's voice was shaky but determined. "I have documentation of everything he said to me, everything he did. I was too scared to fight back then, but I saved everything." She'd endured months of Trevor's harassment before finally quitting without another job lined up. The company had paid her a small settlement in exchange for her silence, but she'd kept copies of everything. "I'll send you what I have," she continued. "But Rachel, be careful. He's dangerous when he feels threatened." "I'm already past caring about dangerous," I replied. "I'm focused on justice." That evening, Claire's files arrived in my email. Text messages, inappropriate comments during performance reviews, and most importantly, a pattern that stretched back years. I wasn't his first victim. I was just the first one fighting back. I spent Tuesday night reviewing every number, every email, every piece of evidence until my eyes burned. The case was stronger than I'd dared hope. My performance metrics were undeniable. Highest client retention rate in the company, consistent revenue growth, 0 missed deadlines in 5 years. The client testimonials were particularly powerful. Marcus Peterson from our biggest account had written, "Rachel single-handedly saved our relationship with your company. Her strategic thinking and attention to detail are exactly what we need in a partner." Another client had requested me specifically for their expansion project, writing, "We've worked with many account managers over the years, but Rachel is exceptional. Please ensure she continues to lead our account." These weren't just compliments. They were evidence of tangible business value that had nothing to do with appearances or after-hours availability. I cross-referenced my metrics with those of recently promoted employees. The comparison was stark. My numbers were consistently higher, my client feedback more positive, my project completion rate perfect. Yet somehow I was the one who didn't deserve advancement. Trevor's promotion criteria had nothing to do with job performance and everything to do with his personal preferences. The evidence was overwhelming, and it painted a picture that would be impossible to deny in court. Wednesday brought the announcement I'd been dreading. Trevor called another impromptu meeting to introduce Amanda as the new senior account director. My position, given to someone with less experience, lower performance metrics, and according to Claire's intelligence, a very different relationship with our boss. I watched Amanda accept congratulations from colleagues who knew this was wrong, but were too afraid to speak up. The injustice burned, but it also solidified my resolve. After the meeting, I made a phone call to Victoria Sterling, an employment attorney who specialized in workplace discrimination cases. My research had been thorough. She'd won significant settlements against companies much larger than ours. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I told her assistant. "It's regarding workplace discrimination and sexual harassment." "How soon can you come in?" the assistant asked. "Is today too soon?" Victoria's office was in a sleek downtown building that projected competence and success. As I sat in her waiting room, clutching my folder of evidence, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Once I stepped into her office, there would be no going back. But Trevor had made his choice when he decided my worth was tied to his attraction to me. Now I was making mine. Victoria Sterling was everything I'd hoped for. Sharp, direct, and immediately outraged by Trevor's recorded confession. She listened to the audio twice, taking notes and occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've seen," she said, reviewing my documentation. "Your boss essentially confessed to running a quid pro quo sexual harassment scheme. The recording alone is devastating, but combined with your performance data and the pattern evidence from your former colleague, we have an exceptionally strong case." She explained the legal process, the potential outcomes, and most importantly, the company's likely response. They'll try to settle quickly to avoid the publicity. Cases like this can destroy corporate reputations. "What kind of settlement are we talking about?" I asked. Victoria smiled grimly. "Based on similar cases and the strength of our evidence, I'd estimate between $400,000 and $600,000. Possibly more if we can prove a broader pattern of discrimination." My head spun. That wasn't just money, it was vindication, justice, and most importantly, the power to ensure this never happened to another woman at my company. "There's one more thing," Victoria added. "I want you to continue working normally. Don't let them know what's coming. Can you do that?" I thought about Trevor's smug face, his casual cruelty, his absolute certainty that he was untouchable. "I can do that." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every morning, I walked into that office knowing I was sitting on a bomb that would eventually destroy Trevor's career. I attended his meetings, responded to his emails, and even endured his condescending comments about team players and knowing your place. Victoria was building our case methodically. She'd interviewed Claire, gathered additional evidence, and most crucially, discovered that 2 other women had filed informal complaints about Trevor in the past 3 years. HR had buried those complaints, but they'd kept records. The company knew about his behavior and chose to protect him instead of his victims, Victoria explained. That's going to cost them significantly more in damages. Meanwhile, I documented everything. Every inappropriate comment, every instance of being excluded from important meetings, every time Trevor praised Amanda for qualities that had nothing to do with her work performance. My phone became my constant companion, recording conversations whenever I was alone with Trevor. Each new recording added weight to our case. The hardest part was watching my colleagues. They knew something was wrong, but they were trapped in the same system that had failed me. I wanted to warn them, to tell them that change was coming, but I had to stay silent. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Victoria called with news that made my hands shake. "We found a smoking gun," she said. HR kept detailed records of Trevor's hiring and promotion decisions over the past 5 years. There's an undeniable pattern. Every woman he's promoted fits a specific physical profile, and none of them had the strongest qualifications for their positions. She'd uncovered a systematic bias that went beyond my individual case. Trevor hadn't just discriminated against me. He'd built an entire management structure based on his personal preferences rather than professional merit. "The legal term is hostile work environment," Victoria explained. "Your company created and maintained a workplace where women could only advance by conforming to your boss's sexual preferences. That's textbook discrimination." The dollar amounts Victoria mentioned made my head spin. This wasn't just about my canceled promotion anymore. It was about years of systematic bias that had affected every woman in our department. "Are you ready to move forward?" she asked. I thought about every late night I'd worked while less qualified colleagues got promoted. Every time I'd questioned whether I was good enough, when the real problem was that I refused to compromise my dignity for career advancement. "I'm ready." Friday morning, Victoria filed the lawsuit. The company had 48 hours to respond before it became public record. She'd deliberately chosen Friday afternoon to file, giving them the weekend to panic before they had to face their legal team on Monday. I went to work that Friday, knowing it was likely my last day as just another employee. By Monday, I'd either be a whistleblower fighting for justice or the target of a corporate retaliation campaign. Trevor seemed oblivious to the storm approaching. He spent the day planning a team-building happy hour for Friday evening, making inappropriate comments about which female colleagues he hoped would attend. At 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Papers served to company president and general counsel. The clock is ticking." I looked around the office, at Jessica, who deserved better than working for a predator, at Amanda, who probably had no idea what she'd really agreed to for her promotion, at the junior employees who were learning that success meant compromise rather than competence. In 72 hours, this would all be different. Trevor's little kingdom was about to crumble, and I was going to be the one holding the sledgehammer. Monday morning arrived with an unusual energy in the office. I noticed clusters of executives having hushed conversations, urgent phone calls behind closed doors, and a general sense that something big was happening. Trevor seemed oblivious during our 9 a.m. department meeting, joking about weekend plans and making his usual inappropriate comments about female staff members. But I noticed our HR director, Patricia Holmes, watching him with an expression I'd never seen before, like she was studying a specimen under a microscope. At 10:30, Trevor's assistant knocked on my office door. "Rachel, you're needed in conference room A immediately." My heart pounded as I walked down the hallway. This was it, the moment everything changed. Through the glass walls, I could see several people already seated. Patricia from HR, our company president, Nathan Brooks, and 2 people I didn't recognize in expensive suits. As I approached the door, I saw Victoria Sterling emerging from the elevator, briefcase in hand, her expression calm but focused. Trevor was already in the conference room, looking confused and slightly annoyed. He had no idea his world was about to implode. "What's this about?" he asked as I entered. Victoria smiled as she took her seat. "Mr. Walsh, I think you're about to find out." The next 20 minutes were the most satisfying of my professional life. Victoria laid out our case with the precision of a surgeon. She started with the recording of Trevor's confession, playing it through the conference room speakers so everyone could hear his casual admission of discrimination. The room went dead silent, except for Trevor's voice explaining his promotion criteria based on attractiveness and availability for after-hours activities. Trevor's face went through several color changes, red with anger, white with shock, and finally gray with understanding. Nathan Brooks, our company president, looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "This lawsuit seeks $500,000 in damages," Victoria continued, "plus punitive damages for the systematic discrimination that has been allowed to flourish under your management." She presented my performance metrics, client testimonials, and the clear evidence that my promotion had been canceled for reasons having nothing to do with my qualifications. Then she revealed the pattern evidence: 5 years of promotion decisions that favored appearance over ability. "Mr. Walsh," Victoria addressed Trevor directly, "your own words, recorded without your knowledge but completely legally, demonstrate a clear pattern of quid pro quo sexual harassment and discriminatory employment practices." Trevor tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. His kingdom was crumbling in real time, and everyone in the room could see it happening. Trevor's first attempt at defense was as pathetic as I'd expected. "This is all taken out of context," he stammered, looking around the room for support that wasn't coming. "Rachel is clearly misunderstanding normal workplace dynamics." Victoria played the recording again, this time stopping at key phrases. "Mr. Walsh, can you explain how telling Miss Mitchell that you promote girls you wouldn't mind spending time with after hours could be misunderstood?" The company's legal counsel, a stern woman named Catherine Pierce, looked like she was calculating damages in her head. Every word Trevor spoke was making their position worse. "Perhaps Rachel wasn't the right fit for the promotion," Trevor tried again. "Sometimes these decisions are about team chemistry and—" "Mr. Walsh," Victoria interrupted, "are you suggesting that Ms. Mitchell's documented performance excellence, which exceeds every other candidate's metrics, is somehow irrelevant compared to team chemistry?" She pulled out Amanda's performance data and placed it next to mine. The comparison was devastating. My numbers were superior in every category, yet Amanda had received my promotion. Nathan Brooks finally spoke. "Trevor, I think you should stop talking." But Trevor was in full panic mode. "This is ridiculous. I've been with this company for 12 years. I've built this department from nothing. One disgruntled employee can't." "3 disgruntled employees," Victoria corrected, sliding Claire's affidavit across the table. "And we have reason to believe there are more." The settlement offer came faster than even Victoria had expected. Catherine Pierce requested a 15-minute recess to consult with her client. I watched through the conference room glass as frantic phone calls were made and urgent documents were reviewed. Trevor sat alone at one end of the table, finally understanding that his casual cruelty had consequences. When they returned, Catherine's expression was grim but professional. "My client is prepared to offer a settlement to avoid protracted litigation," she announced. "We're proposing $450,000 plus a confidential letter of recommendation and agreement that Ms. Mitchell's departure was voluntary." Victoria didn't even pause. "My client's damages exceed your offer, and the confidentiality clause is unacceptable. We're seeking $500,000, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and Mr. Walsh's immediate termination." The room went silent. Trevor's face went white. "You can't fire me," he said, his voice cracking. "My contract." "Your contract has a morality clause," Nathan Brooks interrupted, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "Sexual harassment and discrimination void any protection you think you have." Catherine conferred quietly with Nathan, while Trevor sat in stunned silence. I watched him realize that the power he'd wielded so carelessly was evaporating before his eyes. "We accept the 500,000, Catherine said finally. "But we need to discuss the other terms." The negotiation continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. Victoria had built an airtight case, and the company knew fighting it would cost them far more than settling. The final agreement was everything I'd hoped for: $500,000, Trevor's immediate termination, and a company-wide policy review to prevent future discrimination. They couldn't agree to a public admission of wrongdoing, but they did agree to implement new training programs and oversight procedures. Most importantly, they agreed not to retaliate against me or any other employees who might come forward with similar complaints. As the papers were signed, I felt a mix of emotions I hadn't expected: relief, vindication, and surprisingly, sadness. Not for Trevor, but for all the years I'd wasted in a toxic environment. Trevor was escorted from the building that afternoon. I watched from my office window as security walked him to his car, carrying a small box of personal items. 12 years of his career reduced to a cardboard box because he couldn't treat women as equals. Several colleagues stopped by my office throughout the day. Word had spread quickly, and the reactions ranged from shock to gratitude to quiet admissions that they'd suspected something was wrong for years. "You did what we were all too scared to do," Jessica whispered when she stopped by. "Thank you." I didn't return to the office after that Monday. The settlement included paid leave while the company conducted its internal review, which was fine with me. I needed time to process what had happened and plan my next steps. Victoria called Tuesday morning with an update. 3 more women have contacted my office since yesterday. Word is spreading, and they want to know if they have cases too. The ripple effects were exactly what I'd hoped for. Trevor's termination had sent a message throughout the company that discrimination wouldn't be tolerated anymore. More importantly, it had given other women the courage to speak up about their own experiences. The company's offering enhanced severance packages to anyone who experienced similar treatment, Victoria continued. They're terrified of more lawsuits. I spent the week taking long walks, reading books I'd neglected during my years of endless work, and planning my future. The settlement money was life-changing, but more than that, I felt free for the first time in years. Nathan Brooks called personally to apologize and offer me any position I wanted within the company. "We'd like to make this right," he said. "You're exactly the kind of leader we need." But I'd already made my decision. I wasn't going back to that office, that building, that environment that had allowed Trevor to flourish for so long. I was done being someone else's employee. It was time to build something of my own. The business plan came together quickly once I started writing. 5 years of watching incompetent management had given me clear ideas about how things should be done. I would start a consulting firm focused on helping companies improve their workplace cultures and prevent discrimination. The irony wasn't lost on me. Trevor's discrimination would fund a business dedicated to preventing the same behavior in other companies. His attempt to keep me down had actually launched me higher than I'd ever imagined possible. I registered Sterling Solutions, named after Victoria, who'd become more than just my lawyer, and began developing training programs, policy frameworks, and assessment tools. My first client was actually my former company. Nathan Brooks hired me to conduct a comprehensive review of their practices. Walking back into that building as an independent consultant rather than an employee felt surreal. I held meetings in the same conference room where Trevor had tried to defend his indefensible behavior. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Amanda, who'd received my promotion, approached me privately during my first consulting visit. "I need to tell you something," she said nervously. "I knew what Trevor expected from me. I thought I could handle it, but after what happened to you, I realized I was part of the problem." Her honesty took courage, and I respected her for it. You were trying to survive in a toxic system. The problem was the system, not you. Within 6 months, Sterling Solutions had 5 corporate clients and a waiting list of companies wanting workplace culture assessments. The business grew faster than I dared hope, fueled by organizations that were finally taking discrimination seriously. My favorite project was developing a training program specifically for male managers about recognizing and preventing unconscious bias. I called it the Trevor Walsh Memorial Workshop in private, though the official name was more diplomatic. Victoria became both my legal counsel and an informal business partner. "You've turned your worst experience into your greatest success," she observed during one of our monthly meetings. The media attention helped too. When the story of Trevor's termination leaked, despite the company's attempts at discretion, several business publications reached out for interviews. I became known as the woman who'd recording her boss admitting to discrimination and turned it into a $500,000 settlement. "Fighting Back: How One Employee's Courage Changed an Entire Industry" was the headline in Business Weekly. The article led to speaking invitations, more consulting contracts, and recognition as an advocate for workplace equality. But the best part was the messages from other women who'd found the courage to challenge their own toxic bosses. "You showed me it was possible," one wrote. "Thank you for going first." A year after walking out of Trevor's office with his discrimination recorded on my phone, I was delivering a keynote speech at the National Women in Business Conference. The audience of 500 professional women gave me a standing ovation when I finished describing how documentation and legal action had transformed my career. During the Q&A, a young woman asked the question I'd been waiting for. "How did you find the courage to fight back when the system seemed so stacked against you?" I thought about that Friday afternoon when Trevor had smirked and told me I wasn't sexy enough for promotion. About the months of gathering evidence, the sleepless nights wondering if I was making a mistake, the moment when Victoria played his recorded confession in that conference room. I realized that my worth wasn't determined by his opinion of me. I answered. The moment I stopped seeking his approval and started documenting his behavior, I took back my power. The courage came from knowing I deserved better and having the evidence to prove it. The applause was thunderous, but more importantly, I saw recognition in their faces. They understood that fighting back wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about changing the system for everyone who came after us. In the lobby after my speech, dozens of women approached with their own stories of discrimination, harassment, and systematic bias. Some were ready to fight back. Others were still gathering courage. All of them needed to know they weren't alone. The final irony came 18 months after Trevor's termination. My former company hired Sterling Solutions to conduct a comprehensive review of their hiring and promotion practices over the past 5 years. The data was damning. Under Trevor's leadership, the department had promoted women at half the rate of men, despite women consistently outperforming their male colleagues in every measurable category. The pattern was so clear that even the most conservative executives couldn't deny it. We estimate that Mr. Walsh's discriminatory practices cost the company approximately $2 million in lost productivity and talent retention, I wrote in my final report. Qualified women left for competitors, while less qualified men were promoted into positions beyond their capabilities. The report led to a complete restructuring of the promotion process, with clear metrics, diverse review panels, and regular audits to prevent future bias. 3 women who'd been passed over during Trevor's tenure were retroactively promoted with back pay. Trevor himself had disappeared from the industry entirely. Word traveled fast in our professional community, and no company wanted to risk hiring someone with his documented history. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in another state, far from the corporate world where he'd once wielded power over women's careers. Justice had a way of balancing the scales, even when it took time. 5 years later, I stood in the conference room of my own company, Sterling Solutions, which now employed 12 people and had consulted for over 100 organizations. The walls were covered with awards, thank you letters from clients, and photos from speaking engagements around the country. My assistant knocked on the door. "Rachel, there's a call for you." A woman says her boss just told her she wasn't leadership material and suggested she might be better suited for administrative work. She wants to know if you can help. I smiled, remembering my own journey from victim to victor. Tell her to document everything and get me every piece of evidence she can gather, and remind her to keep her phone handy during meetings. The fight against workplace discrimination would never be completely won, but every case we took, every settlement we secured, and every policy we changed made it a little harder for the next Trevor Walsh to destroy someone's career based on personal bias. As I picked up the phone to counsel another woman finding her courage, I thought about the recording that had started it all. Trevor had thought his power was absolute, that his victims would accept their treatment silently. He'd never imagined that his own words would become the weapon that destroyed him. He tried to keep me under his thumb by canceling my promotion. Instead, he'd pushed me into a future where I was in control of my own destiny. A future he definitely hadn't budgeted for. And this was just the beginning.